Hello, and welcome to the Mindful Coping Podcast, Amplifying Voices, where I feature various voices in the mental health community to create safe spaces of dialogue and growth. I'm Rhys Moon, a 16-year-old teenager from Southern California, diagnosed with Tourette's and OCD, and I founded Mindful Coping, a platform dedicated to providing free and accessible resources for teens with mental illness. You can check out my content on my Instagram at Mindful Coping and my website, mindfulcoping.net. And today, I'm so thankful to be joined with Kathryn from the Road to Recovery from OCD. And without further ado, Kathryn, give us a brief introduction about yourself.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. So I guess I could kind of start with, my name is Kathryn, obviously. I am 18 years old. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and currently I'm a freshman in college studying clinical counseling psychology. And I have struggled with OCD, social anxiety, and depression for quite some time, but I only started receiving treatment when I was around 13. And from then, I have been in intensive forms of treatment and I've been receiving therapy. I've been on medications and I've just been really dedicating my life to recovery and then becoming a mental health advocate.
Wonderful. That's so amazing how you have such an extensive history and how you used, your condition to increase and advocate for mental health awareness. My
Thank
next
you.
question is, how have you been managing your mental health during quarantine?
It's definitely been a struggle managing my mental health during quarantine, which I feel like is probably the case for most people who deal with some sort of mental health struggle. But one of the main things that I've been doing is really trying to keep myself connected with other people, because I feel like when you have a mental health struggle, you have the tendency to feel really isolated and alone. But when you make constant efforts to connect yourself with other people, especially those who suffer from similar conditions or daily challenges that you do, it can become really helpful. And I think that's one thing that's been really helping me is just staying connected with people. And another thing is really making sure I'm staying on top of my treatment. So for me, that means meeting with my therapist at least once a week, keeping on top of my medications, and constantly making sure I have a set list of coping skills to help me in any difficult situations.
Wonderful. Do you have any specific tips you'd like to share with our audience?
I'd say one of the big ones is develop a coping skill list or kind of like a toolbox that can kind of help you in really anxious or really difficult situations with your mental health, depending on what you struggle with particularly. But I find it really helpful because sometimes when you're having like a flare up or something's really difficult, it can be challenging to try to figure out what to do to recenter or regulate yourself in those moments and make yourself feel better. So I think it can be really helpful to find out what things help you the most. Like for me, I love reading, and I like watching different Netflix shows. So a lot of times when I'm in those moments, I'll have a list and I'll be like, what things could I do in this moment to make myself feel better and kind of ride out those difficult feelings and still feel the emotions, but also get myself to a better frame of mind.
Yeah, I completely agree. And with regards to tics, I've been using things like tick logs to help me
Oh,
manage
yeah.
my symptoms and also log the methods that I've been using. So I definitely agree that keeping, a list or something that you can go back to is a super helpful resource because you understand yourself the best and what helps you the best. Mhm.
Definitely. And I think that's something that you definitely grow to learn over time. Like it's not something that's going to
Yes.
come immediately
Mhm.
because you know yourself best, but you're going to learn over time what works the best through trial and error.
I completely agree. What specific areas of mental health interest or concern you the most?
There are many areas that interest me and concern me, but probably one of the main areas is OCD awareness because a lot of people, which you probably experienced this yourself since you also have OCD, but people don't understand the true nature of OCD. They just associate OCD with being clean or organized and think it's just a cute personality quirk when in actuality, it's a really debilitating condition and can really interfere with the quality of someone's life. So that's been one of the main things that I've chosen to raise awareness for is OCD. Because one thing is, I feel like if there was more awareness regarding OCD, more people would get diagnosed with OCD at an earlier age. because a lot of people, they'll just have these symptoms and be like, oh, well, it can't be OCD because OCD is being neat and clean and I'm not those things. And so I think that's one of the main things that I raise awareness for. And another thing is just the inaccessibility of mental health treatment is something that really concerns me, because obviously in our society today, people a lot of times still don't understand the importance of mental health and how it's just as important as physical health, and that you need to do things to take care of your mental well-being. And if you don't, it's just going to get worse, especially if you have a mental health condition. So that's something that I definitely am very passionate about, is raising awareness about the inaccessibility of mental health treatment. And hopefully through having these open conversations and discussions, more people will be bound to understand the importance of it and how critical it can be for someone who has a severe or debilitating mental illness.
I completely agree, because I think that there are so many negative social stigmas and misconceptions associated with not only tic disorders, but OCD. Like I remember even myself being confused at the diagnosis, because it was like, wait, this is not what I thought. But in reality,
Yeah,
it's such a more, nuanced and layered and complex disorder.
oh,
And
completely.
yeah, and I want to go back to that point that you said about it being a personality quirk. That is such a common misconception, and people are like, oh my God, I must be OCD too because I cleaned my desk this morning." And while it's probably intentioned as a joke, that sort of narrative perpetuates, I don't have to get a diagnosis or I don't need help, but it's just something simple that I could walk off, which is, negative
Yeah.
to people who are truly in that questioning stage or thinking about whether or not to go and get professional help or not. Mhm.
Oh, completely. Like, that's kind of my whole perspective, is a lot of times I'll think, well, if someone actually knew the debilitating nature of OCD, they wouldn't be making these jokes.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the main reasons why I raise awareness and speak up about these things, just to educate people, because I think that's one of the main reasons why there's so much misunderstanding and all these misconceptions around OCD, just because people don't understand it and its true nature. So I think just having open conversations and dialogue about it will really help to increase awareness and hopefully increase the amount of people who are getting the help that they need and getting diagnosed at a right age, and not where they're in the middle of their life and find themselves in a place where they can't function.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, what has your journey of mental health awareness and wellness been?
It's definitely been a very long journey, to say the least. I definitely began struggling the most with my mental health when I was in high school. And I had to leave for a lot of high school to receive treatment. And that definitely caused a lot of like misconceptions with my peers, especially like where I was, because I wasn't at school, and I was away at residential, and then I was away in a partial hospitalization program for my OCD. And these were all things that I needed to do to get myself better, and I don't regret them in any way. But I kind of began my awareness journey just to spread awareness with just my immediate peer group and kind of explain what was going on with me, just so they could understand what I was experiencing and where I was in the first place. But then over time, I just became more and more passionate about raising awareness for OCD. And when I was a junior in high school, I began my Instagram account, The Road to Recovery from OCD, which was around 2 years ago. And I think it was definitely one of the best decisions I've ever made, because I think not only has it helped to raise awareness and help other people in their struggles, it's really helped me and my own struggles and my own path to wellness. Because I think a lot of times we don't realize how beneficial it can be to help others, and how tremendous it can be in helping ourselves, and learning that while we're experiencing all this pain, we can also help other people. And sometimes helping those people in the meantime can help to minimize that pain and make our struggles more manageable. So that's something that's definitely helped me. And from there, I become really interested in psychology. And now I'm in college studying to eventually become an OCD therapist.
Wow, that's incredibly inspiring. And I just wanted to say that, you know, scrolling through your Instagram account and just looking at how detailed and educational and wonderfully created all of your posts are is incredible. And learning about facets and subsets of OCD that I had no idea existed. And I feel like even among people in the mental health community, there's always opportunity for growth, education, and learning. And I'm learning new things every day by meeting new people and, having open conversations online. So I think that's wonderful how you're raising awareness that way. And I also can relate with regards to stigma around friends. I've definitely struggled a lot with the ups and downs that have led to confusion among my own peers. Like, hey, like 3 months in a row, I didn't notice a lot of your symptoms, and then now they're just bad again, right? And I know that they don't mean that in an interrogative or demeaning manner, but just sort of getting those educational aspects out there and making people understand what mental illness is like, I feel like would reduce so many of those questions that can be harmful towards people suffering from mental illness.
Oh, completely. I think that definitely having these open conversations are just so important. And I think that not only having them among your peers, I think even like classroom settings would be even more important and beneficial, where people can hopefully begin to understand their conditions more and feel that they shouldn't be ashamed of what they're going through, because what they're going through is very difficult, but is nothing to be ashamed of, because a mental illness is a struggle or illness or condition like anything else. And it's just as valid, even though it is often much more misunderstood than a lot of other physical disorders or conditions.
Completely agree. And myself, I've experienced a lot of ups and downs. And all of my sophomore year last year, my Tourette's was getting a lot better. And then during the pandemic, I saw, spikes and flares. And then I feel like with mental illness, people suffering from those symptoms, once they sort of get over them, they forget how harmful they can be until it comes back again. So it's definitely,
Completely.
it's definitely sort of a shock, but learning how to deal with that and cope with that has been something that I've been able to channel through my Instagram account as well.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I think definitely it can be so helpful to learn yourself through educating others. And I think another thing is also letting other people know that they're not alone in their struggles, because I think that's something that can be so challenging. Is before I was diagnosed, or even like within the first couple of years that I was diagnosed, I didn't know anyone with OCD. And I think just having these online communities of mental health advocates and people who are raising awareness can be just so beneficial in helping ourselves as well and them.
Completely agree. What was the inciting incident in your life that made you start wanting to promote mental health?
I think honestly, there were a lot of things that kind of over time that culminated in me wanting to raise more awareness for mental health. But I think one of the main things was just how much people misunderstood what I was going through. I think, especially like what I went through when I was a sophomore and a junior, was just incredibly difficult, which I know many people can relate to with a mental illness. And it just felt like I was so alone and that things would never get better. And I think it was really difficult for me because a lot of people didn't understand what I was going through. They just saw me not being able to go to class, barely functioning. And I think I just wanted to show people what I was going through and kind of proving to them and to myself what I was going through was legitimate, and that it wasn't just something that I was making up or faking, which is something that OCD a lot of times can make us feel that we're not really experiencing what we're experiencing, since it is also known as like the doubting disorder. And I think that through raising awareness and seeing it being so received in such a well way by my peers, it just made me want to spread awareness even more among greater populations and communities. And one story in particular that just really made me realize what an impact my work was having, even when I only had a few hundred followers on Instagram, was I was in one of my classes And I was just sitting there and I overheard someone across the room say, "I'm so OCD." And one of my peers who followed my account, I overheard her correcting the person and say, "You shouldn't joke about OCD. It's actually a really serious illness and condition." And I just kind of had an epiphany. And I was like, well, if I could educate just that one person and that one person educates someone else, imagine how many people in the end could be educated, which just made me want to take all my advocacy and my Instagram platform to the next level.
Wow, that's incredible. And I completely agree that more than, reaching Instagram milestones or getting this many likes, it's the little small intimate moments that really, boost your confidence and give you the will and the desire to push through and really deal with mental health advocacy. And I could definitely relate. And how my first encounter with sharing my story, a couple of really, close acquaintances and friends of mine at school reached out and said, "I've been dealing with OCD for like this many years, and I had no idea, and I would not have known if I hadn't come out and explained my story in the beginning." And it was very heartwarming because not only did it demonstrate that this is not something that I'm alone with, but there is, a dire need for education and awareness, because it's not just me, it's a lot of other people around the entire world.
Oh, completely. I think that's so important. And I've had like similar experiences where people,
Mhm.
like my peers, have come up to me after sharing my story or following my account. And they say, "I've been struggling with OCD and I never knew anyone else who was struggling with it. So seeing you be so open about it is just inspiring and
Wow.
makes me feel less alone," which, like you said, it can be so heartwarming and even
Mhm.
more impactful than reaching a certain Instagram milestone or getting a certain amount of likes or followers.
I completely agree. This next question is a little more personal, but are some compulsions and obsessions more severe than others? And if so, how do you cope with them?
Yeah, I think this is definitely something that can obviously differ from one individual to the next because everyone's OCD tends to present itself in a different way. But for me, probably a majority of my most severe obsessions and compulsions are the ones that surround perfectionism. So for me, a majority of my perfectionism surrounds school and my success in school, and just feeling that my life rides on me getting perfect grades and me getting high praise from my teachers, which for so long was so debilitating because assignments that should have only taken like 30 minutes or an hour wound up taking up to like 8 hours. And it just led to just myself and just what I knew myself as just to kind of deteriorate before my eyes, just because I was so consumed by my obsessions and my compulsions. And people didn't really know what was going on. They just saw that I was receiving these really high grades and praise from my teachers. And they didn't see all the pain that went on behind closed doors. And I think that all facets of OCD are incredibly valid and all deserve equal awareness, and they can all be equally debilitating. It's just everyone seems to, from my experience and hearing from other people as well, everyone tends to have that one particular obsession or compulsion that just kind of just can destroy them to an extent if it's not managed properly. So that's definitely over my time of having OCD and then being diagnosed and in treatment. That's the obsession and the compulsions, the rewriting, the rereading that can be that has been the most debilitating for me.
Completely. And I can empathize with you in sort of feeling like you're dealing with all of this alone when everyone on the outside is sort of, just living their own lives. And with you, regards to school and feeling that everyone sort of just sees you as a student with uh, like amazing academics and perfect grades. For me as well, I've played the piano competitively since the age of 5 and 6. And then when
Oh,
I
wow.
started dealing with my most debilitating compulsion, which was having to play and repeat the same note over and over again, it literally made it impossible for me to play the piano, which was my passion. And I had to cancel competitions, recitals, stop going to lessons, and sort of feeling that unexplainability to others as to why, like, what I thought this is what you did, what's happening. And then even that fear, that obsession over if I told them, they wouldn't believe me, or if I told them, it would be an excuse, is something that I think would be relieved by, doing things like OCD education and awareness and removing that stigma.
Oh, completely. I think that it really can be so debilitating to the point where people don't necessarily recognize that it extends far beyond. And for most people, it doesn't even exist in terms of contamination
Mhm.
or cleaning.
Yeah,
And I think that it's just so important to share our experiences so people know what we experience, and then hopefully they can learn to empathize with those with OCD and be more vocal about the true nature of OCD in general.
completely agree. So with regards to the pandemic and everything going on right now, what steps are you taking to put yourself on the path to mental wellness?
There are definitely a lot of things. I think one of the main things is learning to take care of myself and be kind towards myself, because I think that it's so difficult, especially in a pandemic and being a student, to not be so hard on yourself. And I think it can be so difficult because, especially, I know myself to be very critical of myself and just tends to criticize everything that I feel I'm not doing right. And I think that during this pandemic, one thing that I've really learned is to let myself have those breaks, take care of myself, and prioritize myself over the things that I typically would have prioritized before my own mental well being. So even like last night, I was like, oh, I should work on some schoolwork, some classwork that I have due on Monday. And I was like, I've had a stressful week. So I think what would be best for me is to take some time to relax. And that can be so difficult, I know, for people to just take the time that they need for themselves to make themselves feel better and to hopefully continue on their journey to mental well being and wellness. And I think that something for me is just learning to prioritize that.
Completely. I definitely agree with you with regards to, prioritizing your individual health. Um, my next question is about awareness, and obviously you've done tons of work with your own account. So what OCD resources, especially free and accessible ones, would you like to share with our audience and our readers?
There are so many amazing resources I found, especially online. One resource in particular is the International OCD Foundation, the IOCDF. They have an incredible website, and they have so many amazing resources about different books that are incredible, different apps, different podcasts. And one podcast in particular that I love is the OCD Stories. I think it's such an amazing podcast because they have different people, from people who struggle with OCD themselves to clinicians and doctors to advocates. And I think they each episode they have a conversation about something completely different. And not only can it help you feel less alone, but also to learn more how to manage your OCD. And that is completely free. And also, there are so many incredible accounts on Instagram, OCD accounts, a lot of them run by therapists and clinicians who provide free advice on just different tips on how to better manage your OCD and how to explain and open up to others. And I would highly recommend some of those accounts. I love Allegra Caston's Obsessively Ever After. She has an incredible account. I love Chrissy Hodges' account. She's a Puro OCD advocate, and she has an incredible account. There are so many individuals overcoming OCD. A friend of mine who I actually met in treatment, she runs an amazing account on her own experiences with OCD and her journey to bringing awareness. So I would definitely recommend following all these accounts. And a lot of times, once you click on one, you wind up finding so many others. So definitely any of those accounts, and just surrounding yourself in the OCD community, which is just so amazing and supportive in itself.
I definitely agree. And I think that there's so much value in not only having, a medical or clinical or, scientific understanding, but also an individual and narrative understanding by hearing um, different voices, hearing other accounts. Because while the numbers and the statistics and, the DSM-5 manual, for example, how they tell you so much about what the disease looks like and what the disorder can feel like, but you never really can get a grasp of how broad and individual the mental illness is until you do your own work reaching out to individuals or experience different situations in which you can compare and contrast stories and see how it's not uh, definitely not a one-sided thing, and how there are so many different sides to the same story, and how even among the same symptom, how people have different experiences and strategies, and so much to learn, even among myself and other individuals in the community.
Oh, completely. I think that it's so beneficial to hear those personal and individual narratives. I think
Mhm.
those in itself can be the most inspiring and motivating factors in wanting to continue to reach recovery and seeing that regardless of having such a debilitating mental illness like OCD, you can still live such an amazing and full life regardless.
Mhm. I completely agree. My next question is a little more lighthearted. Tell us 3 fun facts about yourself.
Ooh, let's see. Okay, one that a lot of people don't really know is I am a huge English person. I love like English in school and I love reading. One funny thing is I actually in high school, even though I'm not an English major, I'm a psychology major, I wound up taking 7 English classes in high school, which is kind of crazy. But it's just something that I enjoy. I love reading books and just kind of immersing myself in different worlds and just getting different perspectives of on life and what other people experience on a daily basis. So that's something. I also love animals. I have a dog. Her name's Matilda. She's a 3 years old. She's 3 years old. She's a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, and she's literally my baby. I love her so much. It's definitely hard because I'm away at college right now, and it can be difficult not seeing her on a daily basis, but it's definitely something that I look forward to. Let's see. And the last one is I really love kids. I love spending time with kids. I babysit a lot. It's actually one of my favorite things to do. And it's something that just brings me so much joy, which makes me want to specialize and work with kids with OCD even more now that I spend so much time with them on a regular basis.
Wonderful. My last question for today is, what are 3 takeaway points that you'd like to share with our audience and our readers?
I would say one of the main takeaway points that I'd want to leave with the audience and the readers would be, most importantly, that it gets better. I think that's something that a lot of times when you're in the heat of your struggles with OCD or any mental illness, you feel that it's never going to get better, that things are just going to stay as they are or continue to get worse. And I'm here to tell you from personal experience, during times when I thought it was not going to get better at all, I thought that that was going to be my life forever. It does get better if you put the work and the effort into your treatment and you just continue fighting. You will wind up in this amazing place that you never thought you could be in the first place. Another thing is that you are not alone. I think that's one of the most difficult things to learn, especially in having a mental illness that's so internalized. I think you feel so alone in your struggles, especially ones that aren't talked about as much, like OCD. And I think just learning that you're not alone in your struggles and that so many other people experience what you're experiencing, and that you shouldn't have to feel alone in your struggles, and that there's so many other ways to connect with people with OCD, to even reiterate that point to yourself on a regular basis, whether that be through Instagram or Facebook groups. It's definitely really important and something that I wish I learned at a much younger age. And then the last thing I'd say is during the pandemic, continue to prioritize yourself, which I think is something that we don't hear as much because obviously it's so important to take care of and prioritize those around us and the people that we love and care about. But I think even more so, we can't learn to help others until we learn to help ourselves. And especially if you struggle with any type of mental illness or mental health struggle, I think it's even more important to prioritize yourself and know at the end of the day, you need to put yourself first in order to be able to successfully and effectively help those around you.
Thank you so much. Well, that concludes this episode of Amplifying Voices on the Mindful Coping podcast. I will link everything that Kathryn shared today in the description box and on my Instagram page. And thank you to everyone who listened to today's podcast. Please follow Mindful Coping for more information about mental health disorders, particularly TS and OCD. And also check out Kathryn's account at The Road to Recovery from OCD _between each word. Contact me at rhys.mindfulcoping@gmail.com for questions, concerns, and comments, and stay tuned for more Mindful Coping specials. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Isn't it funny? We came to that. I thought I won you over, but you were holding back. Isn't it funny? You could not care less. How you took those words back, now I'm just a mess. I'm running away from escaping dreams of yesterday. Convincing me this cannot be. Trying to find another way. Yeah, I think my head always knew it, but I didn't tell my heart. Let go, I couldn't do it.